Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. My husband slammed an envelope onto the counter and pinned me with his stare. The paper inside slid out like it wanted to accuse me. "You did something," he snapped, jaw tight. My hand moved first and I grabbed it before he could. I'm Maya, 34, and I knew that envelope on sight. I tried to play dumb because I panic like that. "You're being intense," I muttered, like that would help. He pulled the letter free and held it up to my face. The top line hit me hard: acceptance, seat confirmed, deadline circled. He jabbed his finger at the signature line, then at me. "Tell me you didn't touch this," he demanded, voice sharp. My mouth opened and nothing came out. He paced once and stopped like he hit a wall. "I paid the deposit," he said, tapping his phone screen. He kept tapping like the truth lived under his thumb. "You don't get to undo that," he warned, eyes wide. I laughed, and it sounded wrong even to me. Not funny, not brave, just ugly and thin. "Why are you acting like this is life or death?" I asked. His shoulders lifted, then dropped, like I'd missed the point on purpose. "It is life or death," he shot back. He leaned in close and lowered his voice, which scared me more. "This is Liam's future, Maya." He said future like it was a weapon he could swing. I tried to take the letter, but he yanked it away. The edge tore just a little and my stomach flipped. He looked at the rip and went still. "Did you already ruin it?" he asked, almost quiet. I hated that word, ruin. It made me feel like a cartoon villain in my own house. "I didn't ruin our kid," I snapped too fast. He stared like I'd confirmed something without meaning to. His phone buzzed and he didn't even look down. He kept his eyes on me like blinking was a risk. "Answer me," he said, each word clipped. I swallowed and felt my throat lock. My hands were shaking, so I shoved them into my pockets. That move was a mistake because he noticed. He stepped closer and pointed at my pocket like a spotlight. "What's in there?" he asked, voice flat. I pulled out my phone, screen still dark. "Nothing," I said, and I heard how weak it sounded. He snatched his own phone up and turned it toward me. An email thread filled the screen and my chest tightened. The subject line had Liam's name in bold. Under it was a polite sentence about declining the seat. My husband flicked the screen down, fast and angry. There it was again, a form confirmation, time-stamped. I tried to steady my voice, but it cracked anyway. "You're stalking emails now," I snapped, reaching for a distraction. He didn't bite, he didn't even blink. "This came to the shared account," he said, and held my gaze. He opened another message and scrolled slower this time. A receipt, a deposit, then a note about forfeiture. He tilted the screen, making sure I saw every line. "Where did the money go?" he asked, and my pulse spiked. I tried to push past him toward the hallway. He shifted and blocked me without touching me. That was his thing, control without fingerprints. My skin went hot and I hated myself for noticing. "Move," I said, keeping my voice low. He didn't, and his mouth twitched like a warning. "You don't walk away from this," he said. The envelope crinkled in his fist, and it sounded like a threat. From the hallway, a floorboard creaked. I turned and Liam stood there in socks, eyes wide. He looked at the envelope, then at my face, then down. He didn't ask what was happening, which made it worse. My husband didn't soften when he saw him. He straightened like he'd been caught, then doubled down. "Go to your room," he ordered, palm raised without looking. Liam's eyes flicked to me like he was waiting for my cue. I should have spoken up right then. Instead, I just said, "Hey, bud," like this was normal. Liam's mouth pressed into a line and he backed away. The hallway swallowed him and my stomach dropped with him. My husband watched Liam vanish, then snapped back to me. "You're going to explain," he said, voice tight and controlled. He held the torn letter up again like it was proof in court. I stared at the rip and my silence became its own confession. I tried to speak, but my brain kept tripping. A dozen reasons fought for the front spot. Some sounded noble, some sounded petty, and I hated that mix. He took my hesitation and turned it into a verdict. "You did it," he said, almost calm now. That calm was the scary part because it meant he'd decided. My hands went cold and my mouth went dry. Then he said the sentence that broke something in me. "You are ruining our son's future," he said, slow and clear. I felt my face flush like shame had a temperature. I wanted to scream back, but I couldn't waste the breath. Because the truth was sitting in my pocket like a live wire. I rushed down the hallway and knocked on Liam's door once. I did not wait for an answer. I pushed in and saw him sitting too still. His hands stayed tucked under his thighs like he was hiding heat. Hey, my voice came out soft then shaky. He nodded fast and kept staring at his knees. I stepped closer and stopped when he flinched. That flinch landed in my gut like a warning. Behind me, the floor creaked again, my husband moving. I swung the door halfway shut with my foot. My palm stayed on the knob like a lock. I heard my husband pause outside and breathe through his nose. Liam's eyes flicked to the door, then back down. He mouthed please like the word cost him. I leaned in a little, trying to catch his face. He turned away like my eyes were too loud. Are you okay? I asked, then hated how useless it sounded. He shrugged, but his shoulders were trembling. I sat on the edge of his bed and kept distance. He pressed his lips together until they went pale. A notification chimed from his phone and he grabbed it too fast. He looked at the screen, then locked it like a reflex. My stomach tightened because I recognized that move. It was the same move I used when I was hiding something. What's going on? I kept my voice low and steady. He shook his head hard, then squeezed his eyes shut. A tear slid out anyway, and he wiped it with his sleeve. He wiped again like he could erase the whole moment. My husband's voice cut through the door, sharp and controlled. Open it. The handle rattled once, then again. I did not answer him. Liam's breath hitched like the sound yanked a string inside him. I moved my hand from the knob to the lock. The click sounded huge in the quiet. Liam stared at me like I had just chosen a side. I realized I had, and my pulse jumped. He scooted back against the headboard and tucked his chin down. His knees bounced fast and uneven. I watched his throat work like swallowing hurt. That tiny motion made me want to cry and yell. Talk to me, I whispered because I could not stand guessing. He swallowed and tried to speak, then stopped. His fingers twisted together until his knuckles went white. He looked like he was bracing for impact. I can't, he finally muttered, voice thin. I nodded like that made sense because it did. I waited, holding my breath so I would not crowd him. My husband hit the door again, louder this time. Liam's head snapped toward the door, eyes wide. He whispered, he's mad, the words shook on the way out. I wanted to tell him it was fine, but it was not. So I said the truth I could manage, I'm here. His shoulders dropped a fraction, then tensed again. He pulled his backpack onto his lap and hugged it tight. That backpack looked like armor and it scared me. Kids do not need armor in their own rooms. I held out my hand and waited for him to decide. He stared at my palm like it was a trap. Then he set the backpack down without opening it. He kept one hand on it like it might run away. Is this about school? I asked, careful with every word. His eyes watered again and he nodded once. He nodded again like the first one was not enough. Then he whispered, I can't keep up. The sentence hit me hard because it sounded practiced. Like he had repeated it in his head 100 times. I felt anger flare, then shame right behind it. Because I knew exactly who he was trying to keep up with. My husband's voice rose outside, tight with irritation. Stop babying him, the handle jerked again. Liam's whole body jolted like the door had struck him. He pressed both hands over his ears and squeezed. I stood and faced the door, jaw clenched. Give us a minute, my voice cracked then steadied. On the other side, silence held for a beat too long. Then my husband laughed once, low and mean. Liam uncovered his ears and looked at me like I was brave. I did not feel brave. I felt reckless, and that felt new. That new feeling made my chest buzz. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a planner. It was packed with blocks, checkmarks, and highlighted boxes. He flipped pages fast, almost frantic. He stopped on one week and tapped until his fingers shook. I leaned in enough to see the pattern, then stopped. Test, quiz, mock exam, another mock exam. My stomach twisted because there was no blank space at all. Not even one day that looked like breathing room. He checks it, Liam murmured, eyes still on the page. I kept my face neutral and nodded. Every night, his voice dropped on the last word. The way he said it made my skin prickle. Who checks it? I asked, even though I knew. Liam did not answer. He just tapped the paper again harder. That tap felt like a point he was too scared to say. My husband knocked again, slower now, deliberate. Each knock landed like a count. Liam froze mid-breath and held it. I realized he was timing his own fear to those knocks. I crouched near Liam so he did not have to look up. "Do you want to go there?" I kept it simple. He blinked fast, then shook his head once. His face crumpled like he had been waiting to admit that. "Say it," I urged, then regretted pushing. He squeezed his eyes shut and forced the words out anyway. "I don't want it." His voice broke on the last syllable. The confession hung between us like a snapped wire. I felt relief and terror at the same time. Relief because I was not crazy. Terror because I knew what this would trigger. And yeah, I had already lit the fuse. Liam's gaze slid to my pocket, quick and sharp. "You did something," it was not a question. My stomach flipped because he saw right through me. He knew I was hiding a choice I had already made. "I tried to help," I said, and it sounded defensive. Liam's mouth tightened like he did not trust help anymore. He glanced at the door again, then back to me. "Is he going to find out?" he whispered. The hallway went quiet, and that quiet felt staged. I knew my husband was listening. I could almost picture his ear near the wood. That image made my throat close. I moved closer to the door and lowered my voice. "He already knows something," I hated admitting it. Liam's eyes went huge and he clutched the planner. He clutched it like a shield that suddenly failed. "What did you do?" he asked, barely audible. I opened my mouth, then stopped myself. I could not dump it on him in this moment. So I said, "I'm handling it," and he did not look convinced. The handle twisted once, slow and careful. My husband's voice slid in right after, too calm. "Unlock it." That calm made my blood run cold. Because calm meant he was past yelling. Liam's breathing sped up, shallow and fast. He stared at the lock like it was a cliff edge. I stepped in front of him without thinking. My hand went back to the knob and I did not turn it. "Not yet," I called out, keeping my voice even. On the other side, a pause, then a sharp exhale. "I'm coming in anyway." His words stayed steady, almost polite. Then I heard the sound of keys scraping metal. I opened the door just as the key clicked, and there he was. My husband stood in the hallway, eyes narrow, fingers tight around the key. He didn't even blink before he stepped inside. Liam flinched, and the air felt thick with something heavy. "Is this really happening?" My husband's voice was almost a whisper, but it was still a command. I didn't answer, I couldn't. Liam pulled his knees tighter to his chest, but his eyes never left the floor. I felt the weight of his silence pressing down on all of us. My husband didn't look at Liam at first. He kept his gaze fixed on me, like I was the only one who mattered. "You have no idea what you're doing," he muttered, shaking his head. His words felt like a slap, each one landing harder than the last. "I'm doing what I think is best for him," I shot back, my own voice tight. I knew it was weak as soon as it left my mouth. But it was the only defense I had left. I glanced at Liam again, and he shrank further into himself. "Best for him," my husband scoffed, moving toward the bed. He didn't care about the tension in the room. He didn't care that Liam was barely breathing. Best for him would be giving him a future, not coddling him. His words were sharp, cutting through the space between us. I stood, my body a little too stiff. "Stop it," I said, more to myself than to him. But my husband didn't stop. He paced back and forth, eyes fixed on Liam, ignoring my plea. Liam's hands moved again, this time tugging at the hem of his shirt. I saw it then, the panic crawling up his neck. I wanted to do something, but the words wouldn't come. Liam glanced at me, then back at the floor, like he couldn't make himself face either of us. "You're breaking him," my husband said, his voice hard. I felt that comment land like a boulder. It hit somewhere deep in my chest, and I couldn't breathe for a second. But I didn't let it show. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "He's not broken," I whispered, finally moving closer to Liam. My hand brushed against his shoulder and he flinched but didn't pull away. I couldn't help the relief I felt at that small moment of connection. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I clung to it. "You're making excuses for him," my husband continued, his voice rising. "You've been making excuses for months. I can't watch this anymore." I looked at him, really looked at him. His face was tight with frustration, but his eyes weren't on me. They were on Liam, like he was a problem to fix. I swallowed, trying to stop my voice from shaking. What do you want me to do? Push him harder, tell him to just get over it. My words were getting sharper now, but I couldn't hold them back. Because I've tried that, it didn't work. You're not his therapist, Maya, he snapped. I'm trying to do what's right, but you're playing the good mom card and it's ruining everything. The word stung worse than I expected. I saw Liam's eyes widen at the mention of therapy, and I knew I had to explain. But I couldn't, not right then. I knew my husband. Dee wasn't going to listen. Not when he had already decided. Instead, I turned back to Liam, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. You're not a failure, Liam, I said, finally, my voice thick. He looked up at me, his eyes glassy, and I saw the fight in them, the one he was too tired to keep up. But he nodded barely, a fraction of movement, a promise to try again even though he didn't believe it. My husband moved toward the door, shaking his head. This is getting out of hand. His voice was low now but still thick with anger. I couldn't tell if he was talking to me or to himself. Call me when you're ready to fix this, he muttered, and with that he left. The door slammed behind him with a finality that made my heart skip. Liam let out a breath, his shoulders dropping in a way I couldn't quite describe. It wasn't relief, not really. It was something darker, more resigned. He didn't want to look at me now, but he didn't pull away either. I'm sorry, I whispered, not sure if I was apologizing for myself or for the mess I'd just created. He didn't answer, he didn't need to. I could see the answer in the way he curled up on the bed, pulling the blankets around him like a shield. I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know how. So I stayed where I was, staring at the door, hoping that somewhere in that quiet, something would change. My phone buzzed again and the screen lit up with a name. I swiped to answer before I could think it through. Hello, my voice came out too small for the moment. Liam's head snapped toward me like I'd pulled a pin. Is now safe, the therapist's tone stayed calm, almost careful. I turned my body away from the doorway and lowered my volume. I have a minute, that was a lie and I knew it. Liam watched my mouth move and his breathing sped up. What happened after the school meeting? The question landed like a punch. I froze because I never told her about a meeting. Then I remembered the intake form I rushed through earlier. My fingers went numb around the phone. Liam slid off the bed and stood unsteady. He kept rubbing his palms on his jeans like they were wet. His eyes darted to the door, then to my pocket. He whispered, please don't, like I'd betrayed him. I'm in the room with him, I murmured into the phone. There was a pause on the line, then a softer question. Is he okay right now? The words felt too clinical. Liam shook his head without even hearing the answer. I tried to cover the speaker with my hand. That only made the sound worse, muffled and secret. Liam's chest started jumping like his ribs were trying to escape. He swallowed hard, then gagged, and I moved fast. Hey, look at me, I crouched in front of him. He couldn't or he wouldn't, and it scared me either way. His shoulders jerked and his face went pale. My brain screamed at me to fix it now. Put the phone down, the therapist said, voice still steady. I didn't want to, because I needed an adult in the room. I'm here, she added, like that could anchor us. Liam made a strangled noise and I felt my control slip. A footstep hit the hallway, then another. The door handle turned slow and I heard a soft click. Not the lock, something else, something deliberate. My husband's voice slid through the crack like a blade. What are you doing? He didn't raise it, which made it worse. I stood and blocked Liam with my body. I'm on a call, my hand trembled around the phone. His eyes flicked to the screen and his face changed. He pushed the door wider with 2 fingers. Liam backed up until his knees hit the bed frame. My husband stared at Liam for 1 second, then at me. Hang up, he said like he was giving a simple chore. No, the word came out before I could soften it. I hated how it sounded, but I meant it. My husband smiled like I'd proven his point. He stepped in anyway and the room shrank. I'm speaking with a professional, I snapped into the phone. The therapist answered quickly like she'd heard this before. Ma'am, is there conflict in the home right now? My husband's mouth tightened as if she'd slapped him. Conflict, he gave a short laugh, nothing warm in it. He held out his hand toward my phone, palm up. Give it to me, his voice stayed level and cold. Liam's breathing turned ragged and he clutched the edge of the mattress. I moved the phone behind my back like a teenager. Yeah, I know how that looks. I just couldn't let him take control of this too. My husband took one step closer and Liam made a choking sound. Stop, I raised my free hand toward my husband. He stopped, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. You're upsetting him, I hissed, pointing at Liam. My husband looked at Liam and shrugged like it was weather. He needs to learn discomfort, he said, voice calm and certain. That sentence made my skin crawl. I heard the therapist inhale on the other end. Liam folded forward and pressed his forehead to his knees. Can you get him water? The therapist asked. I turned toward the doorway, then stopped. Leaving Liam alone with my husband felt wrong. So I said no, and my husband's smile sharpened. You're making him worse, my husband said, voice low. He glanced at the phone again like it insulted him. Tell her you're done, he pointed at my thumb. My thumb hovered and I hated myself for hesitating. Liam whispered Mom, and it sounded like a crack. I dropped to my knees beside him. Breathe with me, my voice shook, but I tried anyway. He tried to match me and failed, and my throat burned. The therapist spoke again, faster now. I need you to check for immediate risk. My stomach dropped at that phrasing, sharp and urgent. I looked at Liam's hands, then his backpack, and my heart stumbled. My husband followed my gaze, then scoffed. There is no risk, he said it like a fact. He reached for the backpack strap, quick and casual. Liam's hand shot out and grabbed it back, terrified. Don't touch it, my voice came out louder than I planned. My husband froze, then slowly lifted his hands. See, he glanced at the phone like it was the enemy. Liam hugged the backpack tight and his eyes went glossy. Liam, I said, soft but firm. Show me what's inside, I kept my face steady. He shook his head hard, then whispered, he'll know. My husband tilted his head, and that tiny motion felt dangerous. Know what? My husband asked, voice polite in a fake way. Liam's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No sound came out, just breath. I reached slowly for the zipper and Liam slapped my hand away. Okay, I lifted my palm like surrender. I won't touch it, my voice cracked on the last word. The therapist's voice stayed in my ear, calm but pressing. Ask him if he feels safe right now. Do you feel safe? I asked Liam, looking only at him. He stared at the floor like it might answer first. Then he shook his head, tiny and definite. My husband's eyes flashed and he stepped forward. Don't put that in his head, my husband snapped. His hand shot out toward Liam's shoulder. I moved between them, fast and instinctive. His fingers hit my arm instead and my pulse spiked. He pulled his hand back like he hadn't done anything. Unbelievable, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. Liam's breathing turned into short gasps again. I heard the therapist say my name, then repeat it. I need him seen, the therapist said, voice firmer now. Today, that single word carried weight. My husband shook his head, already rejecting it. We're not doing that, he cut in like he owned the decision. I stood up straighter, forcing my voice to stay even. We are, I surprised myself with the certainty. My husband stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Then he pointed at Liam, slow and accusing. This is what you do, he said, voice hard. You turn him into a victim. I felt anger surge up, hot and ugly. I also felt fear because part of me believed him. Liam made a sound like he was trying not to cry. He squeezed the backpack again, knuckles white. My husband noticed and leaned closer, too close. Give me that, he ordered, and Liam recoiled. Enough, I stepped forward, forcing space between them. My husband looked at me like I'd pushed him. He hadn't moved, but he still acted offended. That backpack stays with him, I said, and my voice shook. My husband's eyes narrowed, calculating. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his own phone. He tapped the screen twice and held it up. A calendar view glowed, filled edge to edge. Look, he shoved it toward Liam. Your schedule does not change. Liam stared at the screen, then made a gagging sound again. The therapist heard it and spoke fast, urgent now. Put distance between him and the stressor, she said. I moved Liam toward the far side of the bed. My husband kept the screen up like a billboard. Stop, I barked and his eyes went flat. You're not qualified to override me, he shot back. That sentence hit me in a place I didn't expect. Override, like I was a nuisance, not his partner. Liam's hand slipped inside the backpack, shaking. Liam, I said, voice gentle again. Just show me, I kept my hands visible. He hesitated, then slowly pulled something out. A small bottle rolled into his palm and my mouth went dry. The label wasn't from a store. It looked printed, cut, and taped on crooked. My husband's gaze snapped to it, quick and sharp. Liam tried to hide it again, but it was too late. My husband moved fast and grabbed the bottle. I grabbed his wrist before he could pocket it. He twisted his arm, not enough to hurt, enough to warn. Let go, he said, teeth clenched. Don't, my voice came out low and dangerous. The therapist's voice kept going in my ear, steady but alarmed. Ask what it is. I looked at Liam and he looked away. What is that? I asked Liam, keeping my eyes on him. He swallowed hard and why. Spurred for focus. My husband scoffed like that explained everything. It's a supplement, he snapped too quick. Why is the label homemade? I asked, voice sharp. My husband's eyes flicked just a fraction. That flick told me more than his words. Liam's shoulders started shaking again, silent and small. It's easier this way, my husband said, shrugging. You always make everything dramatic. I stared at the bottle, then at Liam's face. Liam looked like he was bracing for punishment. The therapist asked, is he being given anything not prescribed? My husband heard that through the speaker and went rigid. He leaned in and pointed at my phone. Turn that off, he demanded, voice tight with panic. That panic was new and it chilled me. I backed up a step, keeping the phone away. My husband took another step toward me. Liam suddenly blurted, it makes my heart race, and then clamped his mouth shut. Everything stopped for a beat. My husband stared at Liam like he'd spoken out of turn. I stared at my husband like he'd revealed his real face. The therapist's voice lowered, careful and intense. I need you to secure the bottle, she said. And I need you to take him for evaluation. My husband shook his head, immediate and absolute. We are not feeding a diagnosis, he snapped, eyes locked on me. I felt my own shame flare because I had fed this system too. Not with pills, with silence, with compromise. I wanted to say that out loud, but I couldn't waste time. Liam was still shaking and his breathing sounded wrong. I reached for the bottle, slow, palm open. My husband yanked it back and held it to his chest. That is mine, he said, like Liam wasn't even in the room. Liam's eyes filled and he whispered, I hate it, barely audible. My husband turned on Liam, voice sharp and controlled. You don't hate it. You hate work. Liam flinched and his hands flew up like he expected something. That movement cracked something in me. Get out, I said to my husband, voice low and steady. He stared like he didn't understand the words. You don't get to talk to him like that. He took a slow breath and his tone turned icy. This is my house, he said, pointing at the floor. This is my son. I felt my face heat, not from anger alone. From fear, because I heard the ownership in it. He is our son, I snapped, stepping closer. My husband's eyes narrowed and he leaned in. Not if you keep doing this, he murmured. The threat sat between us, heavy and real. The therapist asked, are you safe? I almost laughed because safe felt like a joke. I said, I don't know, and my voice sounded raw. My husband heard that and smirked like he'd won. Liam started coughing, then gagging again. He pressed a fist to his chest and curled forward. I dropped beside him and kept my hand near his shoulder. Stay with me, I whispered, and his eyes squeezed shut. My husband finally looked uneasy, but only for a second. Then he hardened again, as if softness would cost him. This is anxiety, he muttered, dismissive. Stop rewarding it, his gaze cut to me like blame. The therapist's voice rose, no longer gentle. This requires medical attention. My husband opened his mouth to argue again. I cut him off with one word, no. I stood and stepped toward the door. My husband shifted to block me, quick and practiced. Where are you going? His voice stayed calm, but his eyes weren't. I held his stare and lifted my phone. I'm calling the pediatrician, I said, voice firm. My husband's jaw clenched and he shook his head once. Don't, the word came out like a warning. Liam whispered my name again, and it sounded like hope and terror mixed. My husband glanced at the therapist's call on my screen. He reached for my phone again, more aggressive this time. I jerked it back and stepped away. His hand hung in the air, then dropped, slow and controlled. "Do you want to destroy everything?" he asked, voice low. I swallowed and forced myself to answer. "I want him alive and okay." My voice didn't break this time. My husband stared at me and his face went still. Liam pulled the bottle back toward himself, shaking. He looked at it like it was poison and comfort at once. I gently took it from his hands and he let me. That surrender felt like trust, and it also felt like a warning. My husband watched the bottle in my palm, eyes narrowed. "You're going to regret this," he said, voice quiet and sharp. I turned my body to shield Liam from him. Then I heard him add something under his breath, "I won't let you." The therapist's voice came through one last time, urgent. "If he becomes worse, call emergency services." My hands trembled, and I hated that I needed that advice. My husband stared at my phone like it was a weapon. I took a slow breath and stepped into the hallway. My husband followed, close enough to crowd me. "You're choosing strangers over your family," he murmured. I kept walking anyway, and my legs felt like they might give out. Behind me, Liam's door creaked, and I heard his small footsteps. He hovered in the doorway, eyes wide, clutching nothing now. My husband turned his head toward him, and his expression hardened. Then he looked back at me, and his voice dropped into a threat. "If you do this," he said, "you'll be the problem on record." I grabbed my keys off the hook, and my husband stepped into my path. He didn't touch me at first, which felt like a choice. "Put those down," his voice stayed clipped and sure. Liam's footsteps stopped behind me, and I felt him listening. I tightened my grip and kept my eyes forward. "You're not stopping me," my voice sounded steadier than I felt. My husband tilted his head like I was being dramatic again. Then he smiled, and that smile made my skin prickle. "Walk out and you'll regret it." He raised his phone as proof. "I'll call it in." He didn't say what it was, but I knew. My throat tightened and I forced air in anyway. "Have you ever heard a threat disguised as concern?" Liam cleared his throat behind me, small and shaky. "I'm fine," he tried, and it came out wrong. My husband's eyes flicked past me toward him. "Go sit," my husband ordered, like Liam was a dog. "No," that word came out of Liam, thin but real. I turned my head a fraction and Liam met my eyes. His hands were empty, which should have comforted me. It didn't, because empty meant he'd already surrendered. My husband's jaw tightened and he took one step closer. He held out his hand for my keys again. I didn't move because moving felt like losing. He lowered his voice and it got colder. "You're unstable," he pointed at me like a diagnosis. "Listen to yourself," he said it like I was embarrassing. I felt heat rush to my face and I hated that he saw it. Liam shifted behind me and I heard his breath snag. I pulled my phone up and tapped the screen with my thumb. My husband's hand shot out fast and he grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to control. My pulse spiked and my brain went bright. "Don't," I said it through my teeth. His fingers tightened like he didn't care. Liam made a sharp sound, half gasp, half plea. My husband looked at Liam and something in him flickered. He let go, but he didn't step back. Instead, he leaned in, voice low and careful. "I'll tell them you're having a breakdown." He kept talking like he was writing a report in real time. I stared at him and felt my fear turn into rage. "Go ahead," the words surprised me as they left. My husband blinked once, like that wasn't the script. Then he glanced down the hallway and I followed his gaze. Liam was still there, shoulders tense, eyes glossy. He hugged his own arms like he was cold. I pointed toward the front door with one sharp motion. "Shoes," my voice shook and Liam moved anyway. My husband stepped sideways, blocking the exit again. "You are not taking him anywhere," his tone stayed flat. I raised my phone higher so he could see it. "Watch me," I said, and my hand trembled. I hit call and the line started ringing. My husband's eyes narrowed and he leaned closer to hear. Liam hovered near the wall, frozen and small. The ringing sounded loud enough to wake the whole block. A voice answered and my mouth went dry. I spoke fast, tripping over words I didn't want to say. "My son needs to be seen today," I heard myself beg. My husband laughed once and it sliced through me. "You hear that?" He aimed his voice at the phone. "She's panicking." He shook his head like a disappointed teacher. I turned away from him and put my hand out behind me. Liam's fingers found mine and he gripped hard. The person on the line asked questions, quick and direct. I answered while watching my husband's face shift and calculate. He mouthed no and drew his finger across his throat. I kept talking anyway and my heart hammered. My husband suddenly stepped toward the wall panel near the door. He flicked a switch and the deadbolt clicked into place. He didn't look at me while he did it. That sound made Liam jerk like he'd been hit. I ended the call without meaning to, my thumb slipping. The screen went dark and I felt stupid and trapped. My husband's eyes locked on mine, calm in the worst way. "Now you're done," his stare seemed to say. "Open it," my voice came out rough. My husband didn't move and he didn't blink. "Not until you cool down," he spoke like the reasonable one. Liam whispered my name again and it cracked. I walked to the deadbolt and tried it once. It didn't budge and my stomach turned. My husband watched like he was measuring my reaction. That's when I made the choice that scared me most. I turned and walked straight to the window by the front. I yanked the curtain aside and lifted it enough to see out. A neighbor was outside bending over a trash bin. I banged on the glass and the neighbor looked up. My husband moved fast, trying to grab my arm. I pulled away and pointed at the lock, then at him. My neighbor's face changed and they stepped closer. My husband froze and I saw panic flash and vanish. He forced a smile and raised his hands like a joke. "She's upset," he called through the glass, voice bright. I shook my head hard and mouthed, "Please." The neighbor pulled out their phone and my husband's smile died. "You're doing this," he turned on me, voice sharp now. I didn't answer him because words felt useless. I pointed at Liam, who looked like he might fold in half. My husband's gaze followed and his face tightened. He walked to the door and unlocked it with a quick jerk. "Fine," the word came out like a spit. He stepped aside but his body stayed angled to block. "Go," he added, and it sounded like a dare. I moved first and Liam stayed glued to my side. My husband followed one step behind us, too close. "Remember this," he murmured near my ear. I felt Liam's hand squeeze mine harder, like a warning. We reached the car and my husband grabbed the passenger door handle. He held it shut with one hand, eyes locked on Liam. "Stay," his voice went soft, which made it creepier. Liam stared at the seat like it was a trap. I stepped between them and shoved the door open myself. My husband's hand slipped and his face twisted with anger. "You're kidnapping him," he snapped, loud enough for the neighbor to hear. The neighbor lifted their phone higher and my husband noticed. "You want to show?" I shot back, voice shaking. I hated myself for raising it, but I needed him to back off. Liam climbed in fast, shoulders hunched. My husband stared at Liam like Liam had betrayed him. I slammed my door and started the engine with shaking hands. My husband leaned toward the window, eyes wide and furious. "You'll lose him for this," he pointed at me like a verdict. Then he stepped back and I saw him tap his phone. I pulled out of the driveway too fast, tires chirping. Liam stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight. I wanted to reassure him, but my voice wouldn't cooperate. My phone lit up with a message and I didn't look. Liam finally spoke, barely audible over the road noise. "Is he going to call the police?" His voice shook. I swallowed and kept my eyes forward. "I don't know," I admitted, and the honesty tasted awful. Another message hit my screen, then another. The phone kept lighting up like an alarm I couldn't silence. I didn't pick it up because I couldn't risk drifting lanes. Liam glanced at the screen and went pale. "What does it say?" I asked, even though I knew better. Liam hesitated, then whispered, "Custody." That single word made my hands clamp harder on the wheel. My throat closed and I forced air through it. We reached the clinic parking lot and Liam didn't move. His fingers stayed wrapped around the seat belt latch. "Come on," I kept my voice gentle but urgent. He finally unclicked it and the sound felt like a decision. Inside, the front desk asked what brought us in. I started speaking, then stopped when my voice cracked. Liam stared at the floor like it was safer. The receptionist's face shifted from neutral to alert. A nurse led us back and Liam's steps dragged. He kept rubbing his palms on his jeans, fast and raw. I tried to keep my breathing even for him. My phone lit again and this time I looked. A photo filled the screen, bright and cruel. It was a screenshot of a drafted email addressed to his school. The subject line said, "Emergency family situation." My husband's thumb hovered in the image like a threat. I shoved the phone into my pocket, heart pounding. The nurse asked if there were substances involved. I froze for one beat too long. Liam glanced at me and I saw fear bloom again. I pulled the bottle out and set it on the counter. My hand shook and I hated that it showed. The nurse's eyes narrowed as she read the label. She didn't look surprised, which scared me more. Did a doctor tell him to take this? Her tone was careful. I shook my head and felt shame crawl up my neck. Liam whispered, "It makes my chest hurt." The nurse's mouth tightened and she made a note. They took Liam's vitals quick and quiet. He flinched at every touch like his body expected punishment. I stood near the door, hands clenched, trying not to hover. Liam's eyes kept sliding to me like he needed proof I stayed. My phone rang and the screen showed my husband's name. I didn't answer and the ringing stopped. Then it rang again and again, relentless. The nurse glanced at it, then back at my face. "Is someone pressuring him?" she asked, low and direct. My mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Saying it out loud felt like lighting my life on fire. I nodded once and it felt like jumping. The nurse left and a doctor came in soon after. The doctor asked Liam simple questions, steady and patient. Liam answered in short bursts, eyes down. Then the doctor looked at me and the room tightened. "We need to talk privately," the doctor said. My heart started racing and my mouth went dry. Liam's eyes flicked up, scared, and I hated that. I squeezed his shoulder gently and he didn't pull away. In the hallway, I told the doctor what I knew. Not everything, not perfectly, just enough to be real. My voice cracked and I felt tears threaten, hot and stupid. The doctor listened, then asked one question that broke me. "Are you safe going home tonight?" I stared at the floor, then at the door behind me. I thought about that deadbolt and the way Liam flinched. I whispered, "I don't think so," and my stomach turned. The doctor nodded slowly and I hated how calm they stayed. They talked about steps, resources, and safety planning. I heard the words, but my brain latched on one phrase. "Mandatory report," the doctor said, and my throat closed. My phone lit again with a new message. This one was shorter, colder, and somehow worse. "You just made yourself unfit." My fingers went numb and I stared too long. I went back into the room and Liam watched my face. He didn't ask because he didn't need to. He scooted closer to the wall, making himself small. I sat beside him and forced my voice to work. "You did nothing wrong," I kept it simple. Liam swallowed and whispered, "He's going to hate me." That sentence made my chest ache in a new place. I shook my head, but Liam didn't look convinced. A staff member stepped in and asked me to step outside again. My heart jumped because I knew what was coming. When I reached the hallway, my husband was there. His face was tight and his eyes were bright with fury. He walked right up, invading my space like he owned it. "Give him to me," his voice stayed low and sharp. I planted my feet and didn't move. He leaned in closer and his smile turned thin. "You called strangers," he nodded toward the exam rooms. "You embarrassed us," his voice shook with controlled anger. I felt fear rise, then something harder rise behind it. I asked the question I'd been avoiding since day one. "Do you hear him?" My voice came out rough. My husband's eyes flashed and his jaw clenched. "He needs discipline," he snapped and glanced past me. I followed his gaze and saw Liam watching through the doorway crack. Liam's eyes were wide and he looked like he might bolt. I stepped sideways to block my husband's view. "Back up," I warned loud enough for staff to hear. My husband froze, then laughed like I was performing. A security guard appeared at the end of the hall. My husband noticed and forced his expression into a neutral mask. "I'm the father," he held his hands out like a plea. The guard didn't move and my husband's mask slipped. I didn't feel victorious, I felt sick. Because even with a guard there, my husband still looked confident. He glanced at my pocket where my phone sat like bait. "You're going to lose everything," he murmured, almost gentle. I stared at him and felt my mind clear for one sharp second. "Maybe," the word surprised me with its honesty. "But you're not taking him tonight." My husband's eyes narrowed and his voice dropped into something darker. "I'll file in the morning," he spoke like it was easy. He turned his phone toward me, screen already open. A document template sat there with our names filled in. He had this ready and my blood went cold. I walked back into the room and shut the door behind me. Liam looked up, searching my face like a weather report. I knelt in front of him and kept my voice steady. "We're not going back tonight," I said, and his eyes filled fast. "Where do we go?" Liam's voice was small and cracked. I hesitated because I didn't have a perfect answer. Then I squeezed his hand and gave him the only truth I had. "Somewhere he can't lock us in," I whispered, and Liam nodded. We left through a side exit with a staff member guiding us. I kept my head down, moving fast, heart pounding. Liam stayed glued to my side, silent and shaking. In the parking lot, my phone lit up one last time. A single photo filled the screen, bright and brutal. It was a picture of our front door from inside the house. The deadbolt was turned and a sticky note sat beneath it. On the note were two words written in thick marker: "See you."